When you joined the Toledo Museum of Art, did you ever imagine that you would be leading during a global pandemic?
Well, this is certainly a different transition than I might have imagined. Of course, by the time I took the role on May 1st, COVID was already a reality for us. So I knew coming in that it was something that I would have to be contended with. But certainly as I was applying for the job, none of us could have imagined living through a pandemic, a global pandemic.
Has the museum staff been able to work remotely?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The nature of our work does support a lot of remote working. So yes, a huge portion of our staff has been able to work remotely. We're also, I think, distinguished, not unique, but we're differentiated in the museum world in that we have retained full employment and full pay. We have not cut anyone's pay. We haven't furloughed anybody. We haven't laid anyone off. So our staff is intact, and while we are working from home and we expect to continue to allow flexible work arrangements in the future, we are actively gearing up for thinking through how we can reopen to the public. And we do have some staff beginning to phase back in to working on site at the museum.
So what were some of the limitations for working remotely, and what work has been done?
Yeah, so an awful lot of work has been related to reorienting schedules. As I'm sure the listeners and viewers of this can appreciate, there's an awful lot of work that goes into exhibitions, goes into display, and with the closure of our galleries to the public and the reorientation of those galleries as we reopen, there's been an awful lot of moving parts. I've sort of analogized it to whack-a-mole a little bit. So there's been a lot of work that's been done, rearranging things. And then of course, as we think about how we're going to reopen for our staff, our volunteers, and our visitors, safety must come first. So we've spent an awful lot of time as a team thinking through what it looks like to reopen safely in this, as I think we're all calling it now, our next normal. So that's been the nature of the work. The constraints are that when you're not in person, you aren't able to have the same types of interaction. You can't pick up on physical cues as well. Obviously, the screen, right, is not the same as being in presence, but at least we get to see each other. So it's not as imperfect a tool as the phone or as email. We've adapted pretty quickly. I think if you speak to almost any organization, there's something called change management, right? How do you manage change? The necessity of working in a new way really took a lot of the sting out of the change management. And our team has been great and flexible. So really it's been pretty smooth. And I think I'm really grateful to the team first and foremost for their ability to roll with us.
So has the coronavirus changed the way the Toledo Museum of Art is doing business, and will it change it in the future as well?
Yeah, so that also great question. So it depends what you mean by doing business. So of course, by definition, if we're talking over Zoom as opposed to being in person, of course, it's changed the business. We are interacting with our audiences digitally, whether it's through our virtual quilting project or whether it's through our other TMA at home activities. So of course that has changed. But I think one of the things which we think a lot about at the museum is you have to remember this is an institution that was founded in 1901. This is an institution which went through the Spanish flu. We have objects in our collection that are 5,000 years old. So it is easy to live in this moment and to try and extrapolate forward when we've never lived in anything like it and think everything will be different. But actually, if we look backwards, we can learn just as much, probably more, frankly, about human resilience and capacity to overcome. So we will unquestionably be living through and working in a different reality as we reopen. We'll have all sorts of safety measures in place, as I already mentioned. But we will get back to normal, especially once there's a vaccine. And it would be short-sighted to not also be planning for a future where some of the public health measures that are being put in place are relaxed because it's safe to do so. So we're thinking in sort of two tracks, Jaden. We're thinking through, what do we do for this next normal? But let's not forget about what happens when things actually go back mostly to how they were before.
What has been the financial impact on the museum?
Yeah, so we went into the pandemic, we went into the COVID pandemic strong. So we've been able to weather it, as I mentioned. So we retained full employment and full pay. it goes without saying that when our doors are closed, we don't have people coming through and we don't have people buying food in the cafe, right, or buying things in the store. But the Toledo Museum of Art is free, right? We're free every day, and we always have been. So while there is a real earned income impact, that earned income impact is less for us than it is for many of our peer organizations. And because of the strength of our operating model going into this crisis, we've been able to weather the storm. I'm really grateful to my predecessors for that. And the other thing I'd add is the team has been great, right? In moments like this, when you have to tighten your belt, it's up to everyone to make individual decisions, and the team has really responded. And we couldn't be luckier to have the team we have here.
So a lot of businesses, they have to stay sanitary all the time, even when there isn't a global pandemic. So how will the museum clean differently? So what will be some of the new practices that will be implemented at the museum?
Well, I'd put us in one of those categories, which is people don't expect to go to an art museum and have it not looking clean. So we have a pretty high standard for ourselves to begin with. But like every organization in this next normal, we will be fully compliant with all of the federal and state regulations. We're very fortunate. The state of Ohio has provided great back to work guidelines, so we will be fully compliant with those. We'll be compliant with OSHA and the CDC's recommendations. But we also, we're an organization that serves the public trust, right? If you look at surveys of most trusted institutions, museums and libraries are among the most trusted, more trusted than universities, more trusted than religious organizations. We have to retain that trust. So that means we've gone the extra mile. So all of our reopening plans have been vetted by an industrial hygienist. All of our office relocations and setup has been vetted by an infectious disease expert from ProMedica. So we have gone above and beyond, not just to make sure that we've stepped up our cleaning, but to make sure that our physical space reflects the absolute best practices from medical and industrial hygiene fields.
So when it comes to making the right decisions and not opening too early or closing too late, do you believe you guys made the right decisions on behalf of employees and visitors?
Yeah, so this is a place where I think history is a useful benchmark, Jaden. So, on October 13th, 1918, Mayor Cornell Schreiber issued what was then called the closing order, and the museum was closed for 46 days during the first wave of the Spanish flu. It did not close during the second wave. To date, we have been closed about, and I should have quantified it before the interview, but we've been closed about 70 days. So I think when you think about the order of magnitude, right, of this pandemic, and you think about our response, this is an indication, I think, of our great sort of governmental work, right, of the advances in public health understanding. But certainly it feels to me as if we, along with our museum colleagues, were absolutely as responsive as we ought to have been at the point of closure. And then on reopening, we have an obligation to this community, to be there for this community. We are the Toledo Museum of Art. We are of and for Toledo. And just as we need to make sure that we are closed to ensure public health, we also need to make sure that we are, or just as we close to ensure public health, we now know more and more about this virus every day. And our community needs us to serve as the place of respite that art museums serve in times of trauma. We need to provide a different experience, a safe experience, but some return to a sense of normalcy, an ability to commune with this world-class collection and find a haven and begin to bring the community together to heal from the psychological trauma of COVID. So we are committed to reopening, but it's not either or, right? It's about the balance, right? It's balancing safety along with an imperative to reopen. We would never reopen if we weren't convinced it was absolutely safe for our staff, our volunteers, and our visitors, and it will be. And we await the governor's decision on our exact opening date, but we are actively working to make sure that when we do, safety is not compromised.
So what have you learned about your organization's staff? What has everyone learned together through this new experience?
Yeah, so a few things, but I think the most important of which is that the way one gets through difficult moments is by having a cohort of people on which you can rely. And I'm fortunate, this is a return to Toledo for me. I spent 6 years at this institution and in Toledo. Toledo is home. So I knew how strong this team was, and I knew how connected this team was. But crises show the best and the worst in people, and this staff and this team rose to the occasion, not just in delivering for the institution and therefore for the community, but also delivering for each other.
So what kind of support has the museum received? Because Toledo is a great community. So what support have you guys received?
Yeah, so we've received the sort of same support that we normally have received. I think, you may have noticed, and many of your visitors or viewers or listeners may have also noticed that we haven't asked for any explicit support. And that's really important to us, as a community, as an anchor institution, as a community steward. The focus in the short term should be on health and human services, should be on frontline response, should be on emergency response. So it's important that we not sort of complicate that message, right? That we not inject ourselves into that fray, if you will. We entered this strong, and based on our forecast, we felt like we were going to be able to weather it based on our available resources. So we haven't made any explicit asks. The community has continued to be supportive because this is an amazing community. And we're looking forward to our next fiscal year, which begins on July 1st, beginning to enter into this next normal with our donor base and with this community.
When the museum reaches the point of reopening, what precautions will be taken to protect employees and visitors alike?
Yes, so great question. So there is no model where we open to the public without first inviting staff back. So we're taking all the precautions you would expect, right? So I'm talking to you from my office, right, without a face mask on because we are in an enclosed space, right? But here's my face mask, right? Every employee will be wearing a face mask. Face masks are mandatory for employees. We have plexiglass barriers that are going to be separating our employees at the front line from visitors. We'll be reopening with a one-way flow through the galleries with limited tickets available for entry at specified times. And I could go on, there is a long list, but what we are planning to do is once we receive clearance from the governor on an opening date for museums, is we are going to communicate all of these new procedures in one place. So rather than continuing to tick through the list, it's actually probably better for your audience to get it all in one place when it's appropriate for us to release it. And we don't want to front run the governor in that regard, but just know that we have thought through the entire visitor experience, and we will make sure that those are communicated through all sorts of different channels just as soon as we can.
And if people don't follow those precautions, what will be the result of their actions?
Yep. So we are creating a visitor experience that has as little friction as possible, and that includes with our staff. So we, of course, are going to double down on making sure we have a clear communication effort and that we do not have non-compliance, but we are going through extra training for our staff to make sure that in the event someone is not willing to participate or someone is not willing to follow the regulations that we put in place, that we have effective means of dealing with it.
So how has the museum been able to interact with visitors virtually?
Yep. So we have a few different platforms, or we have using our website, right? Using social media. There are a few different platforms available to us. Our marketing team has done an absolutely terrific job. And as I already alluded to, we spun up a part of our website called TMA at Home that has a number of different activities that are available for people of all ages, but for families in particular to participate in. It's been exciting for me not only to see the uptake by folks in Toledo, but the world over. I think at this point we have more than 15 different countries who have participated in TMA at Home activities. We also have done some analog things. You may know about our inserts and the blade, right? Our coloring activities that we've had in the Sunday blade. So we've tried to keep the collection in front of people's minds, but more than anything, right, the opportunity for the museum is to help people get through this very odd circumstance and to do so by exposing them to great works of art. So we've tried to do that through every medium available to us.
So how can people support the museum if they would like to?
Well, we would love to have anyone support who felt so inclined. They could go to the Toledo Museum of Art website, where there's a section for donations and for support. And they can give right there. And of course, every cent is welcome. We are not only free, we are totally private. We are not supported by a tax levy. We are not supported by government funding from Columbus or from DC. So we are very, very fortunate, right, to be able to have a degree of autonomy in our activities, and it's made possible by the support of this community. So we appreciate anything anyone is willing to give.
So once the pandemic's over, what do you guys have planned for visitors?
Yeah, well, so Jaden, you're about the most impressive 11-year-old I've ever met. It wouldn't surprise me if you knew when the pandemic is going to be over. But it is hard for me to answer that question because we don't actually know when it will be over. What I can tell you is that when there is a vaccine and we resume some semblance of normalcy, it is important for us to not just provide the museum experience that people know and love, but this is the really exciting part for me as a new leader, to look forward and to think about how we can heighten our ambitions and begin planning for that future now. So what does that look like? It still means we're going to have great exhibitions, but maybe even a step above what they were before. We have magnificent works of art, but perhaps there's an opportunity to reinstall the galleries in new and dynamic ways. These are the types of things we need to start planning now, but it is my hope that the pandemic is over sooner rather than later, but I couldn't tell you a precise time and therefore a precise set of grand reopening plans.
So I reached out to a few of my viewers to see what questions they had for you. So I got about 6 questions from some of our viewers. So
Sure.
The first one was, will current exhibits be extended due to the museum's closure?
Yep, so that again is something that we were going to communicate all in one place, and that is the whack-a-mole I was talking about before. But yes, current exhibitions will be extended. Of course, as you can intuit, that means there was a knock-on effect on all of the exhibitions after it. So it will be easier, again, for us to communicate this all in one place in due course. But yes, current exhibitions will be extended. We are still looking at the most appropriate way to make sure that they are opened in ways that allows them to be cleaned and disinfected in compliance with the CDC and OSHA regulations.
Will the Family Center be reopening? And if so, what precautions will be taken?
Yeah, so as the museum reopens, we're taking a phased approach. That's the approach we've taken with our staff. That's also the approach that we're going to take with our visitors. So we'll reopen with a one-way flow that really focuses on the galleries. So in our initial reopening, the Family Center won't be reopened. That's obviously a shame for us and for the community, but that is such a high-touch area, and it is off of the natural path that we felt like it wasn't right to include in phase 1. But as we said at the outset, right, our guiding values here are to be here for this community, but to not compromise safety. The moment we have determined that we have a safe way to open the Family Center, we will do so.
I know you commented a little bit on this. What is the plan for Symphony concerts inside the Peristyle for this fall?
Yeah, so we're so fortunate in this community to have not just a great museum, but to have other great cultural amenities, including and especially a symphony and a ballet now rolled up into the Toledo Alliance for Performing Arts. So we're working closely with our friends at TAPA to work that through. And of course, just as we had to do with our exhibition schedule, they are also playing that same game of whack-a-mole with their concert schedule. But we are supporting them in every way possible to figure out an opportunity to leverage the Peristyle for this upcoming season. But there's a lot more work that needs to be done there. But we're in close contact with TAPA working that through.
When can we do glass workshops again?
The answer there is very much the same as the Family Center, right? So in our phased reopening, we're really focusing our attention on the galleries in the Edward Green building, which is the large Beaux-Arts building that most people think of as the museum, the place where you take your prom pictures and your graduation pictures out front. In my office, I can see people, not right now as it rains, but I can see people taking pictures all day this time of year. So the glass pavilion won't be in that first phase of opening. And we're also going to need to make sure that we can come up with adequate disinfecting and safety methodologies for that high touch area. But just as soon as we will open up that space. So the history of glass in Toledo is woven into the fabric of this place. And we want to make sure that hot shop is available as soon as possible.
How has the response been to the TMA COVID-19 virtual quilt project?
Yeah, so really, really good. I think we have over 40 entries at this point, right, including some international ones as well. They're not all local. So we're really excited by that response, of course, and even more excited, in some ways for the show that it's related to Radical Tradition, which is one of those exhibitions which, while we've had to move things around, is still on, and this community is going to respond to. It's going to be a remarkable show of quilts that will open next year.
How does the museum decide what exhibits to put on display?
Yeah, well, that's a little bit art, a little bit science, but it is actually something that I had a meeting about just today as we think through how we can create some more systematicity around that. But the short answer to your question, Jaden, is that we try to come up with a blend of exhibitions, sort of think of it as a portfolio that will engage broadly, that will strike sort of different interests, because of course there's a huge diversity of interests, right, in any given community, including in ours, and that also blend a focus on our collection and shows that we generate internally using our curatorial team, and shows that we take that have been organized by other venues. So we try to strike balances across all of those dimensions and make sure that over any given multi-year cycle, we end up with an exhibition program which is ambitious, that is popular, but also that is intellectually rigorous and engages people in conversations about the issues that are important here in Toledo.
Adam Levine, Director of the Toledo Museum of Art, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.